So, philosophy and the search for truth is a section sort of subtitled in your book. So, given its biases and its finiteness, given all this, it is true that philosophy is perhaps one of the most open subjects. And this is sort of something Soccio writes, and I've quoted him. And some of the goals of philosophy include, as Soccio mentions, expression of thought, reason, insight, contemplation, and experience. And I don't know if I would 100% agree with this next statement that Soccio states, but I would say generally, within reason, this is true. No question or point of view is off limits, Soccio says on page 9. I would say that is true if it can be backed up. Or backed up meaning providing justification, systematizing it, or if not that, being found in a certain part of the globe and it has systematized thought behind it, and it can be backed up historically, whether that be written or oral, but there is a very huge controversial written emphasis on philosophy. Very controversial, though. We don't have really time to get into that. So, a good thing about philosophers, which is sort of unknown in the socio-political sphere of today, is that the origins of a person's argument are irrelevant. So, if a person's argument is coming from a conservative point of view, if the content has meat, if the content is quality, it doesn't matter. We can utilize it. If it's coming from a liberal point of view, doesn't matter. We can use it. We can utilize it. If it's coming from an atheist, doesn't matter. We can utilize it. Coming from a religious person, doesn't matter. If it's coming from a cultist, doesn't matter. Insofar as whatever is being said is quality and can be backed up and justified and withstands the test of philosophy. That's why I always say that if people in our society were more in tune with philosophy, we would not be having the problems that we have today. Okay, so relativism. I won't spend too much time on this, but I will spend a little bit. So Soccio does talk about relativism in this first chapter, which is the belief that knowledge is determined by specific qualities of the observer, including age, ethnicity, gender, and cultural conditioning. Okay, so notice that definition, and then I'm going to quote another definition that he gives, which is actually different. I don't know if he caught that or if he intended on leaving it sort of open-ended for the reader, but the next definition is this. Relativism is the belief that knowledge is determined by specific qualities of the observer. In other words, absolute universal knowledge of the truth is impossible. One opinion is as good as another. Unquote. So actually, these two definitions of relativism are in contradiction with each other. Not necessarily, but they can be. So for example, the first one does not necessarily omit the possibility of universal truth. Now this is a little bit higher level, so I won't spend too much on this, but I guess the point that I'm getting at here is there are harder versions of relativism where there is no sort of absolute truth, and then there are softer forms of relativism where there might be a truth, but we're all sort of having to sift through no clear answers to get there. So I do think both are sort of relativistic, and Karl Marx, before he did become hard relativistic, was more of a soft relativist, and that's why we have his ethics of Marxism. Nevertheless, moving forward, Soccio talks about a sociologist in the book named James Q. Wilson. And I've actually experienced this in my classrooms as well. There is this common, I wouldn't say it's a salient, maybe this is because of my demographics, where I'm from the Bible Belt in the South, so I would actually say this is less salient than another moral paradigm or worldview. But he seems to suggest that this is what's most prominent within the classroom today. His students, everybody's relativist, and even sort of suggests that's the case with professors. My experience has not been that. I will say that it's very common, especially among students. But with professors, I will say that I have not experienced that. But I think it's because I came from the Bible Belt. I think what is most common is pure divine command ethics, which is an equally, I don't know if equally is the right word, but a very problematic theory in itself as well, too. Nevertheless, in his James Q. Wilson's experience in the classroom, what he says he finds is that students are saying, yeah, moral judgments, they're arbitrary. Some students sort of express, we all just need to have tolerance. Tolerance is what's required of us, and that's what it means to be a good person. We shouldn't be judgmental of others. We shouldn't condemn. But he points out this moral shock that, within the students, that when we talk about awful atrocities within humanity, like, for example, one that I think is one of the most abhorrent is chattel enslavement, or the Holocaust, or now today like a genocide that's happening in Gaza. But for example, here he says when his students learned about the Holocaust, he points out this shock where there's no general agreement, like between the students when they're trying to sort of take a look back in history and look at the characters at play within history. There's no sort of automatic moral intuitive assenting on this issue, and it's sort of, the students are sort of like, well, quote, it all depends on your perspective. And this is a really great quote from him. What he says is, what worried me was not that the students were prepared to accept some excuses, but they began their moral reasoning on the subject by searching for excuses. So it's like the moral, intuition just was not there. And I find that deeply concerning, and I think that's a product of secularization, and sort of just a loss of touch with meaning and nihilism. And I talk about this in some papers that I've written. But another conversation for another time. But it is something that is a direct sort of contradiction with relativism, that you have to be willing to accept that it's not necessary. If you are a hard relativist, it's not necessarily a wrong thing, it just happened, which I find deeply, deeply disturbing.